What is a successful season for Colorado? I don't know. We don't know. We're going to find out this year in 2023, but we're going to talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Bohr, but today we have a special guest, Pac-12 analyst, former USC quarterback, former Pitt quarterback, Max Browne. Max, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
We're going to get perspective from all over the country, and Max has some of the best perspective in the country, I think. Today we're going to be talking about what is success for Deion Sanders in Colorado. Can Coach Prime lead him to a bowl game? Is 5-game success? We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the challenges that Shedeur faces, making the jump from the FCS to the Power 5 and the Pac-12. And then we're going to talk about the all-around pressure on the Buffs this season. But before we do, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Buffs your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, Max, you heard the topics. We talked about it a little bit before the show. What is a successful season for Coach Prime? We have people saying a bowl game is possible. We have some people saying 3 wins is a great year. We don't know what to expect with the roster, but what do you think is a successful season?
Successful season for me for CU is in November being in contention for a bowl game. And I preface it that way rather than a specific win number or a specific outcome because, one, I think Colorado's schedule is really unique where, you know, it could get ugly real quick in terms of the wins and losses given who's on their schedule. So if in November we're sitting here and it's not, hey, it's doom and gloom and there's some excitement and they're competing for a bowl game, that goes a long way. I also think, and it's funny, I went on a national radio station and the national college football fan, I think, sees CU and it's like, oh, what the Vegas says the over-under is 3 or 4 wins. Like, what the heck? They got Coach Prime. They got all this talent, but they don't realize the nuances of, one, you know, how bad Colorado was a year ago. But then, two, and I actually think this is maybe even the more important factor, is how deep the Pac-12 is. And when you go down their schedule, it's not like you're able to pencil out several easy guaranteed wins. And the flip side is also true. If you asked an Arizona fan, if you asked a UCLA fan, if you asked an Arizona State fan, like they're looking at Colorado as a game that they could win and they need to win. So I think wins are going to be much more hard to come by than years past in the Pac-12. And that schedule is going to be brutal where if we're in November, we're around Thanksgiving time and obviously the weeks before and CU has a shot at a bowl game and they're in contention and people are fired up. I think that to me is a success for year one for Coach Prime.
That makes sense. And I like the time frame. I like the by November, by Thanksgiving, because it's a little vague, a little specific. I like what you're doing there. I wanted to run something by you, though, because I kind of have this I came up with this take a couple days ago. Realistically, there's no way for there's one way. There's no way for him to fail this season. Unless he wins 1 or 0 games, that's obviously an utter failure. But the only way to go is up. Do you think that maybe there's a little bit of, especially with the national media. If you read any article about Colorado, I do it myself when I write about them at Athlon. I mentioned last season they were 1-11. They were very bad. Obviously, they only returned 10 players from that roster, though. Do you think some people are holding on to that 1-11 record too much?
I think so. I'm probably guilty of that as well, and it's in large part because it's so foreign to see. We've never seen a college roster get turned over like this. So naturally, my habit's like, oh, you know, you point to last year, but last year obviously it isn't really applicable. But I will say, you know, there are some elements that I think could still transfer over. Offensive line being one, that's a huge component for me. It was a group that really struggled last year, and that's a hard group to go and really get an influx of talent and, you know, high quality players just because it's a pure premier position. And I think even if you have the best skill players, if your O-line's not dialed in, we all know how that story plays out. So I do think there is some elements that carry over, but again, this is uncharted territory. It'll be a new look CU. And that's why it's so hard to predict where CU is going to land in this because you don't know exactly where they're going to shake out. And when you go down the conference in the Pac-12, there's almost every single fan base. You can find a way to be bullish on their 2023 outlook, which might always be the case in July when everyone's optimistic, but it really feels like the case this year in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of preseason previews of the entire Pac-12, and I think I want to say this is the deepest it's been in like a decade, if I'm being honest. I don't feel like I remember a specific time where it's like there's 5 teams that could contend for the Pac-12 title. Realistically, those same 5, if everything goes right, which it can't go right for all of them at the same time, but if everything goes right for them, there's a playoff chance for 5 teams. It's super deep, super tough year to kind of try to, I guess, find success. But I think when you talk about the schedule, I like you said, there's a lot of tough games. There's only 2 games on the schedule where I'm like, I won't say guaranteed win, where I'm like, that should be a win. I think Arizona State and Stanford. Obviously, the new coaches, Arizona State's in a similar situation. They flipped the roster, and then Stanford, who I very close with the program, they have the least amount of production in the Power 5 returning, which is means new people could emerge, but it also means they have no experience. I think the success aspect for Coach Prime is realistically getting some on-field product looking like there's some improvement to help convince recruits to come. I think a bowl game would be huge. I think 6 wins, even if they lose the bowl game, I think 6 wins would be astronomical. They get over 6, I think we throw a parade. I think the people of Boulder should be out there partying. What do you think if they make it to a bowl game?
I'm with you. Parade might be a little bit much, but I think Folsom, if they win over 6 games, I'm sure there's going to be at least 1 or 2 storming the field moments at some point in the season. And hey, I called the Cal game last year, so I know what that looks like, and I know the buzz that Folsom can bring. But I'm right with you. I mean, if they were above 6, I think bowl game's a tremendous success. Above 6, that's big time, and it also gets me thinking, like, if they're above 6. That means other teams in the conference did not reach the level that we're thinking they're at right now, and so it gets me thinking about who those teams might be. But you're right. I think Stanford and Cal on paper right now, I think really have a big uphill battle. Stanford especially, just given, like you said, the talent production coming back. But even like Arizona State, man, if we had a third co-host in this pod and it was an Arizona State guy, like, they have reasons to be excited, and they have some players. So I'm with you. Colorado's definitely favored in that game for me right now, but by no means is it like oh my gosh, this is going to be an easy win.
Yeah, no, there's certainly no easy wins. The scheduling gods, if you will, aka the people in the boardroom like 10 years ago, because they make the schedule so far in advance, they didn't do them any favors. I think though, because a lot of people are considering this to be, I guess, a weird experiment with the transfer portal. I think this is a prove it year for, even though obviously it's year 1, he's viewed as one of the more prolific coaches. This is a very experimental time with the portal. And I think we're going to learn a lot as to whether he wants to continue this method or not after year 1, because I feel like the whole purpose of doing this was to succeed right away.
And he said that in the Fox Big Noon podcast with Joel Klatt, in that, hey, I mean, the mass exodus in year 1, the reason you do that is to get guys in the program that are going to stick. And if they have to do this again in year 2, that means they missed in year 1, and they did not accomplish what this whole goal was of this offseason. So I'd be surprised if we see it again next year. That might be stating the obvious, but I also have a feeling that, part of Coach Prime's DNA is he's always going to be able to get a phone call with a recruit looking for a new home. And it would not surprise me if Coach Prime embraces the turnover model, like we've seen. And maybe, I mean, as I said out loud, sometimes you see it with like LeBron NBA teams. Like, it's almost like organizations just have to embrace that you're going to have a lot of roster turnover every single year, because you're getting vet minimums, guys that are popping in for 1 year, guys that are looking to just have their like golden year and then cash out with a new team. Yeah. Obviously, that's a unique comp right there, but it just feels like Deion's personality is he's going to embrace the transfer portal when so many coaches have it about, homegrown talent and, what's good for the long-term betterment of the kid. I think Deion views it much more business-like, which could very well result in wins in a new structure we haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating experiment. I think there's going to be a book about it someday. I've talked about it on this podcast just about every day. Realistically, to make it simple, if at least 35 of the transfers don't hit, it's going to be a rough year because there's 70 or there's 50-ish transfers. If 35 of them aren't at least high-level starters or high-level backups, it's going to be tough for Colorado. Before we move on, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel. Get 10 times your first bet amount and bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting on everything from money line to over under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. Shohei Ohtani, always a good bet. On an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. You don't have to worry about your money not coming through. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Max, we talked about what success is for Coach Prime, for Colorado. I think we left out one factor because we're going to talk about it right now. But my biggest key to success for Colorado is Shedeur Sanders not struggling. I think if he does well right away, they're going to do well right away. But as a quarterback, making the jump from the FCS to the Power 5, regardless of, I know people get on me, Max, and they're going to get on you too. There's a difference between FCS and Power 5. There just is. It's not to say that the FCS players aren't talented. There's just a little more athleticism, a little more whatever it may be. But what are the challenges that Shedeur Sanders is going to face as he looks to lead Colorado past this tough schedule?
Yeah, I think right away, just jumping leagues. You saw it last year with Cam Ward, the Washington State quarterback, who struggled at times last year and was awfully successful at the FCS level. I know it's different than Jackson State, but I think what happens is when you bump up the level, the average difficulty of your completion just rises. And to say it a different way is there aren't as many easy throws to just get you in rhythm. Or if you make a mistake, there aren't as many easy throws to get you back in rhythm and get you into that level of comfort. And so if things are just much more difficult on an average snap, I think you can see the impacts of that with a guy like Shedeur Sanders. And I mentioned the offensive line before, and that to me is the big one. Don't have as many concerns about the weapons. I feel like they'll be able to figure that out. They'll be able to figure out the pace. And the pace of their offense will help their offensive line. But if the offensive line struggles and Shedeur Sanders is not able to get comfortable, let's say potentially he gets banged up, he's not able to get in a rhythm, like that's going to be an uphill battle. And when you look at it through the lens of this is as deep of a quarterback conference as we have ever seen in the league. And it's the best conference when it comes to the quarterback position nationally this year. And if you get into shootout games where Shedeur Sanders has to feel like he needs to be Superman because he's playing Bo Nix, because he's playing Michael Penix, because he's playing Caleb Williams, DJU, even Jaden DeLora who can ball out. I mentioned Cam Ward, Cam Rising. That's half the conference. That's 7 quarterbacks right there. Like if he gets into a mold where Colorado's playing from behind or he feels like he needs to be Superman every time, sometimes that can work against a quarterback. And I think the mental component of how he adjusts to that, especially early on in the season with some of the tough games they have, that to me will be the big challenge for Shedeur Sanders in 2023.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think his biggest strength could be his biggest weakness. He has one of the stronger arms in college football. And realistically, if he's trying to throw it all over the yard and maybe gets a little antsy, mistakes could happen. I think we saw with Cam Ward. Cam Ward's kind of reminds me of a Johnny Manziel type where he could run around in the backfield for 20 minutes and then sling it downfield. Shedeur can run, but he's not elusive or he's not going to run around like that. What do you think the challenges are going to be if the offensive line can't hold up? Because for a quarterback where you don't feel comfortable, what are the issues in your head? Like how much time do you give yourself?
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out to me is I have not seen Shedeur Sanders that much. I've seen clips and highlights and Sports Center moments here and there, but everyone that talks about him raves about his accuracy. And when you start getting banged around and you're not comfortable and you're having to move around, the first thing that goes is your accuracy. And then the ripple effect from there is, your general confidence. And then maybe you're skipping reads and skipping progression. So that to me is the biggest thing. I think if he is walking into games where the talent on his team is not as good as the next team, which was not the case at Jackson State, that's just a different mentality shift. I felt it a little bit when I was at USC versus Pitt, where when you're at Pitt and you might not have the talent advantage every single time, like when that play is there that you've schemed up for an entire week, like you better make the most of it. Versus at USC, it was we can always get that one back. It's just a different mentality at times, and so I'm confident that he's going to show well. I think at the end of the season, you'll be like, all right, this guy is a good quarterback. Like we see the future there. But I think it's naive to think that he's not going to struggle in some capacity at some point of the year. And if I'm a CU fan, I'm expecting that. and I'm paying attention to how he responds, because that'll tell me more than anything how he's wired and the overall structure that he's got at the QB position.
Gotcha. If you have to give, like, let's say 3 keys to Shedeur Sanders being successful, what would they be? No specific order. Just, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, it's a good question. One to me again is offensive line. I can't highlight that enough, because I think that was.
There are concerns still with even all the additions. There haven't been many positive reports about the offensive line. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, no, exactly. 2, I would say the RPO game, and that's a little bit nuanced, but I think just in that Sean Lewis offense, I think it's going to be vital to find easy completions for a guy like Sanders to put pressures on defenses and get him in a rhythm. So if they can find success with that to me goes a long way, and it should be like RPO / running game, because the RPO game is going to suck if you don't have a running game. So that's 2 there. And then 3, when he does struggle in a game, how does he respond the next game? Or when he does struggle in a possession, how does he respond there? And that to me is critical, right? If he's a guy that embraces that, then I think he's going to find a lot of success. But if it becomes a negative snowball effect, which, as far as I know, that's never been a challenge. We've never seen that from him in his career, of having to respond like that. And that to me is critical. Where's he at mentally when things go south? Where's the program at? Where's Coach Prime at when things go negative? I'll be very curious, how he responds to that. That's a critical factor. You could say that about like really any quarterback, but his situation's so unique because of who his dad is, because of the expectations coming in, because of the expectations on the program, because of, like you said, how loud they are. But that factor to me is even more front of mind than it would be with other quarterbacks.
Yeah, Max, I don't want to say it, but I think we got great minds and we're thinking alike, because that's one of my biggest.
Love it.
I think it was about a week or so ago, I had my 5 things I was most interested to see. And one of them was how they handle adversity, especially with the offense, because I think it's cool to go fast. It's really cool to run a play every 30 seconds of real time. But how cool is it when we go 3 and out within 2 minutes and all of a sudden we're down 14 or something because we're going so fast and something goes wrong? And so I think that's a very interesting point that you made about seeing how they respond, because especially Shedeur, because if he's down, the whole team's down, because we all know if the quarterback's down, the quarterback's kind of like the body language vibes guys. So if the vibes are down from the quarterback, the vibes are down from everybody, which Colorado, I don't know if they could afford that this year. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the pressure on the Buffs that they're facing from the media, from themselves, and from the Pac-12 in general when we come back. We are back. Sorry, Max, it's a quick break. We are talking about the pressure on the Buffs. What is it? How, scale 1 to 10, if you had to give me a number right now, what would you put that pressure at? Which is weird because their win total is like 3.5.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go, it might be a cop-out answer. I'm going to go 5 because
right in the middle.
Yeah, because I think it's like an 8 or 9. You could argue it's an 8 or 9, but let's say Colorado loses the first couple of games. I can just see it in my mind already, the script flipping of like, we're in year 1. It's a long way up. Last year it was a struggle, and as long as we're getting better every day, I can see the narrative changing, and it will be fascinating to see if it does play out that way, how Coach Prime handles that situation. But because of that, I think where you have the average college football fan that might say 8 or 9, but the well-educated college football fans like, wait a sec, let's be honest here. We respect what Coach Prime has done and all the energy he's popped into the program, but let's be real. This program was one of the worst programs in college football last year, so let's temper it down a little bit, which is why I land at a 5 there.
Yeah, I think I'll go a little higher. I'll say pressure at a 7. But yesterday I did a whole episode about the target being on their back by other teams. So I would say pressure at a 7, target on their back level about a 10, just because, 1, we talked about it, they're loud. 2, Deion Sanders is on the sideline. I think there's going to be some sort of gratification when you beat Deion Sanders, his team of his transfers. And then 3, we've kind of seen it from Pat Narduzzi. We've seen it from Matt Rule, Jim Mora. Coaches don't really like this transfer portal experiment method. So I think there's going to be some behind-the-scenes gratification, behind-the-scenes little chips or shots fired at Coach Prime if they beat them, because I think Colorado's kind of put a target on their back just by becoming relevant, if you will.
It's such an interesting dynamic where, like, when you look at it through a national lens, I think it has one view and one connotation. And then when you look at it through a Pac-12 lens, like I'm a Pac-12 guy. Colorado, just to be straight up, is not the first team I think about. But for the national fan, it probably is for some teams, because they think about Coach Prime. Like Colorado right now, like I think about Oregon, Washington, and USC. And to me, to be honest, Oregon State before I think about Colorado. And I've never experienced this in my broadcasting career where it just there's just different narratives and different positioning depending on, your fandom, where you are in the country. And I mean, it's a testament to what Coach Prime's done, because he's engaged the national media, which is huge, and he deserves a ton of credit. But it's just so unique and fascinating because, to your point about the pressure question, I think that's where that scale will net out with everyone differently.
Yeah, and I think if we're being realistic, the pressure should be a 2 or a 3. Like there's no reason to have any expectations for this team you talked about earlier. We got a brand new roster, which I have another question about the roster we're going to get to in a second, just because people tell me it doesn't matter, but I think it does. They have a brand new roster, very tough schedule, and realistically, it's just hard to compete in the Pac-12 this year. Regardless of where you are, who you are, USC could drop 2 games, and it wouldn't shock me. Oregon State is my dark horse to make it to the Pac-12 title game, but they also might not make it and have 3 losses because the conference is so deep. My question about the roster, and you could attest to this because you were transferred from USC to Pitt. How important is it to gel with your team? I say that's one of my bigger concerns, is this team coming together and playing against people, because there's a difference between practicing against the same guys every single day. Maybe Johnny over at the corner spot, his weaknesses because you throw at him every day. But what is the differences and kind of importance of gelling as a whole team?
I think it's critical. I'm not saying you need to be best friends with everyone on your team, but I do think that's one thing that the best comp for this scenario is USC last year. And they did not have nearly as many transfers, but they had a lot in the grand scheme of where we were at this time last year. And they gelled really well, and it was a large part because of the leaders they had on their team. Like Travis Dye deserved a lot of credit, as Shane Lee, who came over from Alabama. Those guys came to USC for the right reasons, not ego-related reasons, for wanting to put a program back on the map. I can't speak to the culture in Colorado right now, but given the flash that Deion naturally probably gravitates towards, or I guess I should say because of Deion's flash, guys gravitate towards that, and you run the risk maybe more so than other programs of getting guys that might be coming over for more selfish reasons, which is not necessarily bad. But if you do that at scale and you don't have the player leaders in place, a head coach can only do so much. If you don't have the player leaders in place, that's where I think you're vulnerable. So I think it's a great point. It's a legitimate concern. But I would say I'm not as concerned about it as I would have been last year, because I saw what USC did with basically every other, or pretty much every vital player was a new face of the program, and they did just fine. And if you have the right head coach, the right quarterback, the right leaders in place, I think you can get people marching in the same direction. Easier said than done, but it's doable.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of external factors, and I just feel like gelling, well, obviously it's not the importance of everything. You guys could hate each other, but as long as Shedeur could throw it to whoever's out wide, it doesn't matter if they're best friends or not, like you said. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things to look out for this season. Pressure, you win a solid 5, I win a 7, and the extra 2 points for me just comes from, we live in a very reactive culture. We live in a social media culture. Everything we do is for social media, whether we want to admit it or not. And so as soon as Colorado loses that first game, whether it's TCU, Nebraska, Oregon, USC, whatever, they're going to be absolutely, for lack of a better term, flamed on social media. And I think the pressure is going to grow. And while we don't want our favorite players or favorite teams worrying about what they say on social media, there's a great NBA player by the name of Kevin Durant who literally made a burner account for Twitter to respond to his criticism. So if you're going to tell me that a group of 20-something-year-olds aren't going to care what people say, I'm going to call you wrong.
I'm right with you. I was guilty of that when I was in the saddle too. Young player looking at the tweets and whatnot. And now it's even more prevalent with more content creators out there, more social platforms. So no way to ignore it for Colorado, but my gut says Deion embraces that because he knows the bed that he made for himself. But you're spot on. If that September record's not pretty, I'll be fascinated to see I know how the social media is going to respond, but more so how the team and Coach Prime responds.
Yeah, it's all about the culture. Max, before I let you out, I need one thing you're excited about for the Pac-12 and then one thing you're excited about for Colorado.
One thing I am excited about for the Pac-12. What do I got for you? The quarterback position, man. I think it's the cop-out answer, but I remember 3 years ago, where we were saying, "Oh, it's no longer the conference of the quarterbacks, like all the quarterback positions down." And it was true. Yeah, 2 years ago, that the conference really struggled at the quarterback position. It's absolutely loaded now. This is the best class, and you might even be able to argue this is the best class ever, best class since the Andrew Luck, Matt Barkley, Nick Foles, Connor Halliday, that class. Little throwback there. You got a Super Bowl MVP and some good NFL starters in there. But it's that good. And I think with that comes an elevated – it's going to be more fun to watch. The teams are going to be better. And kind of a PSA for the average Pac-12 fan, I think 6 wins this year – should be treated like 7 or 8 wins in years past, because it's going to be hard to the teams, even teams 6 through 10 in the Pac-12, they're much better than they were 3 years ago, which is not a sexy take at all, but it's in my opinion, it's a factual take. And just keep that in mind when you're watching Pac-12 ball this year.
Yes. And then I need your one Colorado excitement. Could be anything, really.
Shoot, I'm excited to see Folsom Field, man. Fired up, sold out. I keep seeing these headlines about the season ticket holders. And, I mean, I remember calling games at Folsom Field and people being like, man, there's no way they're going to get this program back. Like, it's not there. Like, the fans showed up. Maybe not at scale. Maybe not like they would if Colorado was pushing 10, 11 wins. But I've been to a lot of stadiums where you just don't feel that buzz at all. And I'm just pumped when Colorado does get some momentum for Folsom Field and CU to get activated. And I think it'll be great for the conference and great for college football.
Yeah, those Bucs fans, they go a little crazy. I went to the spring game. That was my first time in Boulder, and you would have thought they were the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs with coming off back-to-back titles. It was sold out. The energy was buzzing. It was snowing. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about Colorado. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about seeing Max Browne cover the Pac-12 this season. Max, tell the people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, I'm active on the social platforms. So TikTok, Brown, it's Brown Max. Instagram's Max Browne, the opposite way. And then, I'll be having a package of games with Pac-12. So hopefully 6 or 8 weekends. So, hey, maybe I'll be coming to Boulder. And I have a breakdown show on Pac-12 too called Pocket Presence. So keep a lookout for that. It's more about X's and O's. Looking at all 22 footage and breaking down schematics there, but active online, love engaging with fans, and always a Pac-12 guy. So it's been fun chatting.
It's been fun having you. I appreciate you guys for tuning in today, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.